I mean, we have tried everything, and my child still won't eat, brush their teeth, take a bath. Sound familiar? Like in the autism community, stimming, AAC devices, these are all things that are pretty well known. But one of the things that causes the biggest burnout in parents, myself included, is children not being able to meet their ADLs. An ADL is just an activity of daily living. These are things that they need to do in order to survive. As they're bathing by themselves, getting dressed by themselves, sleeping through the night, eating food with their own utensils. These are all things that a lot of times just get taken for granted, but it's something that our kids need to learn line upon line, and they don't just do by themselves. They need very intentional guidance to get these goals accomplished. If your kids are not performing these tasks, you are not a bad parent. You just don't have the right tool. So today, I'm going to try to give you the key to unlock that toolbox in order to get the right tools placed into your home. Hey, I'm Kimberly, founder of Supporting Autism Mama. Over here on this side of the internet, we do not gatekeep our wins as special needs parents. Today, that includes how to overcome the obstacle that sometimes is activities of daily living in our kiddos. Over here at Supporting Autism Mama, I really try to pick an intentional goal each month so it's something that we can overcome together. Last month in June, we talked all about homeschooling, and I try to supply podcast episodes, short reel forms, and several different printable downloads and ebooks so that you had all the tools you needed to homeschool your child if you wanted to this fall. In the month of July, I plan to do the same thing with overcoming our activities of daily living. Every podcast episode this month, all of my short form content this month, and every checklist, printable download, and ebook will all be centered around helping you and your family develop the right tools so that you can overcome activities of daily living in your home. Today, we're going to talk about what an ADL is, why ADLs matter, how ADLs can actually be very tricky for our neurodiverse kiddos, how sensory needs play a huge role in all of this, and how you can build a routine that your kids and your family are actually going to stick to. So number one, what is an ADL? ADL is an activity of daily living. This is any task that any human being needs to do every day. These are fundamental tasks that allow your child to develop. These are literally things that we need to accomplish every day. I'm talking eating, taking a bath, going to sleep, brushing your teeth, brushing your hair, clipping your nails, getting dressed. All of these things are activities of daily living, or ADLs. Some of these tasks come pretty easily to our neurotypical friends, but for our neurodiverse friends and those on the autism spectrum, sometimes we need very intentional step-by-step planning in order to get these goals accomplished. And there's several reasons and several different things that go into this that we'll get into later in this episode. And here I just want to mention that it's okay that they do things a little differently. It's okay that it's going to take your child and you very intentional planning to get these goals accomplished. It is very overwhelming as a parent because you don't necessarily have the right tools or know exactly how to go about this. And this is where I hope Supporting Autism Mama this month helps to bridge that gap so that you're able to learn what tools you need, learn what routines you need in your home so that you and your family can develop these ADLs so that you as a parent are less burnt out and are able to provide the best home environment for your child. So that's what ADLs are. So now let's talk about, why do ADLs even matter? Why does it matter if my child can't feed himself or can't get dressed? I mean, these are tasks that I can just keep doing for him, right? Why does it even matter? Simply put, being able to complete your ADLs on your own is going to develop several things. It's going to develop independence, connection, confidence, and regulation. These are all things that your children are going to crave and all things that your children need in order to develop lifelong. I kind of mentioned this previously when it comes to autism awareness, when it comes to just the neurodiverse community in general. I feel like it's very well known. Stimming is very well known. Sensory rooms are very well known. Sometimes using an AAC device. I feel like these are all very common things that you see throughout our community, or even throughout just the awareness that Autism Month or autism awareness just brings to the table. But something that doesn't get talked about enough is how difficult it is when your child is, my son is 7 years old and still is not potty trained, still does not feed himself, has just started pulling up his shorts to start the getting dressed process. These are actually the things that are very overwhelming as a parent. If my son stims in the middle of church, I don't really care if people look at me 3 different ways. I don't really care if people snub their nose at me if he vocal stims in the middle of Walmart. That stuff is brushed off my shoulder. I'm over it. I'm past it. I can deal with that. But having to constantly have someone 100% be dependent on you and never really get past that toddler stage is where my personal burnout comes. And I know if I'm feeling this burnout, someone else is feeling this burnout too. So this is the pivotal moment that happened in our home when I was able to try to figure out where we could build this independence and where we could learn our ADLs better so that we could develop independence. And when we started to develop that independence in my 8-year-old, I saw his confidence grow, his regulation grow. I saw our connection grow, all because he was becoming more independent and being able to do some of these tasks on his own. It was developing his confidence and his regulation. It was also helping me. Someone wasn't relying on me 100% of the time. I was able to go sit down for 30 seconds before the next kid needed something because he was able to go pick out his outfit and get dressed. These are really the things that I feel like cause burnout in our special needs community. They say that special needs moms have the same stress levels as combat soldiers. I've never been in active duty. As an ER nurse, I can say that sometimes going to the ER is a break from some of the stress levels that I have to deal with at home. And one of the biggest things is because I'm needed 100% of the time because my children are not able to meet their activities of daily living. Something needed to change. And that's where I've set up these different routines in our home to hopefully expedite that process. So that's why in the month of July, my biggest goal before we start school in the fall is to just keep working on some of these routines and keep working on mastering our activities of daily living. We are not building perfection. I do not expect them to do everything on their own before the fall, but Mama's tired. So we are looking to build sustainable, sensory safe routines to help us increase our independence in this house. And I'm just going to take you along for the journey. That's what ADLs are and why they matter. So now let's talk about why they can sometimes be tricky in our neurodiverse community. Why is it more difficult maybe for our neurodiverse community to be toilet trained versus some of our neurotypical friends? In this section, there's a phrase that we're really going to focus on. If you are in OT, if you have an occupational therapist, if your child goes to OT somewhere, you might have heard this term thrown around. And if you're on a wait list somewhere and you've not gotten into OT, I really want you to pay attention to this next part. This word is called task analysis. This is just a very fancy, very textbook way of saying, when I tell my child to go brush their teeth, I hear, hey, Vinny, it is time to go brush your teeth. Vinny hears several different steps that it takes to brush his teeth. He has to stop what he's doing, go into the bathroom. The lights may be very overstimulating in the bathroom. He has to overcome that obstacle just getting into the bathroom. Once he's in the bathroom, he has to locate his toothbrush. Finding things sometimes for our neurodiverse community is also very difficult. After he locates his toothbrush, he has to take the cap off of the toothpaste. And that's a fine motor skill that sometimes is also very difficult in our neurodiverse community. And once he's finally mastered how to take that cap off, he has to squeeze the toothpaste. Same thing. Same fine motor skill that maybe sometimes we're lacking. Let's say he gets that toothpaste on the toothbrush. Now he has to put that toothbrush in his mouth. And if you have a kiddo like mine, Vinny is very, very, very sensitive with his oral motor. He's a major avoider when it comes to his oral motor input. And so putting that toothbrush to his mouth is very overwhelming and very difficult. He drinks meal replacement shakes for food. He does not eat solid food. So he's very, very sensitive when it comes to his mouth. And that's a very hard task for him. Let's say he even gets past that. Okay, well now how long do we brush our teeth for? So he needs to set a timer in order to be able to brush his teeth for a certain period of time. Then we need to spit out the toothbrush. Another skill that sometimes is underdeveloped in some of our kiddos. Spitting, blowing, these are all things that have to do with our oral motor skills that if they're not developed yet, again, is a hard task for our neurodiverse community to master. So the next time you tell your kiddo to go into the bathroom to brush their teeth, you might be hearing they just need to go brush their teeth. They just heard 10, 11, 12 steps. Task analysis helps us to break down each one of these steps and figure out maybe where the overwhelm is coming so that we can stop there, overcome there, and then move on to the next task. So it's where we take a system like brushing our teeth or taking a bath and we break it down into smaller steps so that it's more manageable for both us and our child, and we're able to accommodate accordingly. Another example I really like to use, any of you have seen Friends, the TV show. So on Friends, on the day of Monica and Chandler's wedding, Chandler leaves because he's anxious about the wedding. When they finally locate Chandler, they say, okay, it's time to go get married. And he becomes super overwhelmed. He gets super, super anxious again. So instead, Ross actually uses task analysis to get Chandler to the altar. He says, you know what? Let's go take a shower. That's the first thing we're going to do. He takes a shower. He's like, okay, now we're going to get dressed. That's the next thing that we're going to do. Okay, now we're going to go to the church. They go to the church. And then so on and so forth. And he's able to break down the big, scary system into different tasks so that it was easier, more manageable, and we're able to do one thing at a time until we actually accomplish what we were looking for. We just broke it down a little differently. And we did the same thing when it came to potty training my now almost 9-year-old. When he was 5, he was still not potty trained. And it took several months of us breaking down each individual task. First, it was, okay, I just want you to go to the bathroom and we're going to change your diaper in the bathroom. Once we overcame the bathroom setting, and to overcome the sound of the toilet. So then I just wanted him to go in, we'd change his diaper in the bathroom, and then I just wanted him to flush the toilet and start to get used to the sound of flushing the toilet because that was a big aversion for him. So we would flush the toilet. Once he was able to go in the bathroom, get that diaper changed and flush the toilet, eventually we were able to sit on the toilet. And then eventually he was able to be potty trained. Even just those simple tasks of breaking it down over a period of time and really focusing on one task at a time really helped us and really helped Vinny to be able to overcome those small obstacles. This is not to say that we spent a couple days on just going into the bathroom or a day on overcoming the flush of the toilet. This was a several month-long period. So task analysis is all about breaking down those steps. We needed to go into the bathroom. That was the first task. Well, we needed to figure out how to make him comfortable getting into the bathroom before we could move on to the next thing. And then once he was comfortable with that, we were able to, okay, now we need to really try to get over the sound of that toilet flush. So let's practice that skill next. And then we were able to add upon it. So it's this line upon line process until you're able to develop all these steps into the system that you're trying to accomplish. Really great tools to use during this process are those visual schedules. I have several visual schedules that we use in our home that I'll link in the description at the bottom of this episode. I do have several visual timers we use in our home. I have our favorite visual timer, and then we also have a visual timer for hand washing and for brushing our teeth. Another thing that can really help our kiddos during this stage when you're breaking down all these steps is video modeling. So if you go on YouTube and you search a kid eating food or a kid brushing his teeth, sometimes them watching their peers on the big screen helps them to be able to be more comfortable with it and see the tasks that are expected of them before they go in and perform these tasks on their own. So you could be maybe working behind the scenes on trying to fix some of the sensory issues in your bathroom, but also be teaching your child about what steps need to come next by modeling, so that once you're able to overcome the sensory component, they kind of understand what's going to be expected from them because they've been watching all the video modeling or the visual schedules, and it's easier to bridge that gap at that point. And if this is still a lot of information, I actually linked a full guide that I've made myself. This is something that's going to break down each ADL into steps. It's going to use that task analysis process to break down each ADL that's big in our lives into each individual step. It's also going to give you maybe some tools that you can use to help aid your child with this activity of daily living. So for toothbrushing, it really helped us to have a toothbrush organizer on the wall so that he didn't have to go search for his toothbrush. It's just in the toothbrush organizer, and that's one less step he has to worry about. And then the toothbrush itself, because he has such a sensitivity to his mouth, we got soft bristle toothbrushes. And so that was another tool that we were able to use until we were to overcome that and move on to the next thing. I'll make sure to use all the tools that we have used in our home and then other things that have maybe come highly recommended by professionals to be able to help you bridge that gap with those different ADLs in your home. And that will all be included in this guide that I'll link at the bottom of this episode. So we've talked about what an ADL is, why it even matters, and why it may be tricky in our neurodiverse community. So now I want to talk on one of the things that if you've been following my channel for a little bit, you know is very near and dear to my heart. And that is the sensory component that comes along with our activities of daily living. Regulation before we do anything. I'm really big on regulate before you educate. This is not just like before you educate and sit down for our homeschool and do a homeschool lesson. This is any task that you're going to do with your child, including especially our activities of daily living. This is something that you are teaching your child, and this is a lifelong learning opportunity. It's so important to make sure that they're regulated before we go and learn these very important tasks. And another thing to think about is maybe that is what's holding them back from being able to complete this task, is that sensory component. I've mentioned several times how I moved into this house and it was a fixer-upper. Whoever had remodeled the house right before we moved in, they had flipped it. And during their flip process, they had clearly used like whatever light they had from the last project. It was this super bright fluorescent light that they decided to put in my kitchen. When we moved in, my now 7-year-old refused to go in the kitchen. Of course, I just thought he didn't want to go to the kitchen, didn't want to sit down, didn't want to eat food because he wanted to run around and play. But after I sat down and observed my child and observed his behaviors, I realized it was because he did not like the fluorescent light that was hanging in my kitchen. Changed out the fluorescent light, and now he comes into the kitchen. And so it's important to observe our child, observe their behaviors, understand sensory processing, and understand it well enough to be able to make accommodations in your home. Sensory processing is something that I feel very strongly about because I saw the night and day difference that it had for my children. I saw my children constantly searching to being regulated and to be able to complete some of their ADLs, be able to do better at school, be able to sit down and have more joint attention with me. These are all things that happened after I was able to learn about sensory processing and learn how to regulate them in my home. Are interested in learning more about sensory processing, I do have a sensory processing YouTube video that I will link in the description. I have a sensory processing ebook, and I also have a sensory processing course that will take you through every room in your house. It's a room by room guide so that you can make every room in your house sensory friendly. We'll break down each of the 7 different sensory inputs and allow you to better understand those moving forward. It teaches you how to observe your child and understand how all of this relates to your individual child, because sensory processing is not one size fits all. It's very, very individualistic. And that's something that I really hone into in that course. So that's something to just keep in the back of your mind. If you broke down all those ADLs as much as you can, if you've done the task analysis on eating at the table and it's broke down as much as it can be, but they're still struggling, maybe at one of those different steps, there's a sensory component that they're not able to overcome that you just haven't been able to recognize yet. It's so important to regulate them first. So we talked about what an ADL is, why it's important for our children to learn these things, why they can be tricky sometimes for our neurodiverse learners, the sensory component that plays a huge part in our activities of daily living and overcoming them. And now we're going to learn how to build a routine that we can actually stick to that's going to help our children overcome these activities of daily living obstacles. So first, I just want you to start small. And by this, I mean you're really struggling with bath time. Make sure that bath time is at the same time every day. Do some of the same tasks leading up to bath time. Don't just throw, hey, we need to go get in the bath. Make sure that the first couple things before you take a bath are the same every day. So that's the first thing I want you to change. It's not even breaking down bath time, not even worrying about the sensory component of bath time, but first I want you to change maybe how we're going to prepare them for bath time. Do they need a social story here? Do they need a visual schedule here? Do they maybe need some video modeling or a book that models this correctly too? Maybe those are tasks that you can do now to help prepare them for how they're going to change bath time. So think about the things that you can do to prepare your child for this new task. And again, this part, one of my favorite things is visual timers. If you follow me over on Instagram, you know that I love our visual timers. We have so many in our home. A visual timer is just a timer that will visually show you time ticking down. It gives you a visual reminder of when time will be up. And it has really helped my children be able to transition a little bit better. Sometimes for the transitioning to getting these tasks done is one of the hardest parts. By starting small, I mean, let's get over that transition first before we even jump into any of the task analysis or the breakdown. The next small thing that you could really do in this area, again, before you even jump into breaking down each step, is the connection with your child. Do they have a special interest? Is there something that they really like to do? Is there something that they're doing constantly every day? This is something that you can just learn about your child by just observing them. Their special interests, my 8-year-old's special interest has really drove so much of our wins that we've had this year. He really likes the weather. He really likes natural disasters. I incorporate any of those things into some of these harder tasks for him, it's usually a win in our house. It really, really helps. So that's something to think about too. Do they have a favorite character? Do they have something that they just want to talk about all the time, or they want to look at all the time? There's certain food that they're always eating. A special interest is just another way we can drive home some of these more difficult tasks. And something else that I'll just include at the end of this description is how to learn what your child's special interest is. My 7-year-old, he's non-speaking, so it's a little harder to figure out what his special interest is. But before this next school year, I plan to use a special interest-driven homeschool curriculum. So I'm really trying to figure out what his special interest is and what it is that's going to motivate him. So that same guide that I'm going to use to help me figure out what my child's special interest is, I'll make sure to link that out in the description for you. So maybe if you need that guide, you also have it available to you. The final thing that I just want to leave you with is just let go of all of the judgment of other people. No one is in your house and sees the difficult task that sometimes these things are. Forget about outside opinions. You know your child best. You're clearly doing as much as you can if you found my channel. If you're really trying to bridge the gaps, you are doing a lot. And I just want to remind you of that and remind you that you are the best parent that your child could have. And you just need to keep on keeping on. We'll figure it out together. The 5 things that we talked about in this episode: what an ADL is, why it matters, why it's so important for our children to overcome these activities of daily living so that they can build that confidence and become regulated, how we can break down those ADLs into simpler steps so that our child can overcome these one step at a time. I want you to remember that sometimes we're not meeting our activities of daily living because we're not regulated, or there's a sensory component in that task that is too much and too overwhelming for us. Sensory needs play a huge role in ADLs. The biggest power I feel like that I have found in the last couple of years with my kiddos is just the power of observation. Sometimes we just need to sit back and just look at our children. They tell us so much without saying any words. I'm going to teach you anything in this episode is that to just watch your child. They're going to teach you their special interests. They're going to teach you and be able to show you where they're having a difficult time with their ADLs if you break it down by step. It could be the light in the room, the temperature of the water, the sounds in the bathroom. There's so much that go into each one of these tasks. So if you're able to break them down and then observe your child, you're able to see where they're having a hard time and be able to just adapt accordingly. At the end of this description, I will link that ADL checklist that goes through each ADL and breaks it down into steps. It's set up in a checklist system so that as soon as you meet one step, you can check it off. It's also going to have a list of different tools that you can use in your home to help you meet some of these sensory barriers or just some of these fine motor barriers, whatever it may be holding your child back. We can help find the right tools for you so that you can bridge that gap. Remember to stay tuned all July long while we try to master ADLs in our home and try to bridge the gap and find you the right tools so that your children can overcome one of the biggest obstacles in our community. If you've liked this episode, please consider giving me a thumbs up. If you have found 2 things helpful throughout this episode, please consider subscribing to my channel so that I can continue to bring you these resources to your home. This is something I feel like our community needs. I feel very strongly about, and I'm going to keeping on as long as I can. Your support means so much to me, and I would love to have you a part of our community. Like always, if you're not following me over on Instagram, I'll put the handle down in the description at ASDmama1017. Over there, I just provide daily updates of our daily routine, how I implement some of these same systems that we talk about on the podcast into our everyday life. It's just a whole ecosystem that I hope you're able to find that I hope helps you and your family thrive. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If there's an ADL that you have overcome after listening to this episode, make sure to comment it down below so that we can build a community in the comment. Stay strong out there, guys.